Ain't you tired of that same old thing? There ain't no shame, cause everybody ain't gonna change. Moxie's looking to stop, they trying to be on. These covers blown, can't fool us for too long. We need a real world champ, no more cheap shots. Consider Mox the right doctor for the detox. You know when ANC's on the track, the beat pops. When all the lead starts.
Welcome back, All Elite family, to another exciting edition of the All Elite podcast. As always, I'm your host, Andrew Kazir, and I'm joined by my boy, Big Match AJ. We are short one guy. As you know, we have Phil on the podcast whenever he has the time. But unfortunately, we couldn't get him on today. So, AJ, how are you doing?
Doing all right. Had a pretty boring day of writing, but other than that, everything's been relatively normal. How are you doing?
I'm good, man. I just got back from a pretty long trip. For those of you that don't know why we're going live and recording so late or so early on a Thursday, I guess, would be because I was at Dynamite Live last night. I made the trip to Denver, about a 6-hour trip. Wanted to see what a live Dynamite show was like. I've been to a couple of pay-per-views, so I wanted to see maybe what this experience could be like. And it was definitely a good time. I went with my mom's boyfriend, and he had a good time, and I thought that was really cool. That was a really interesting part of it for me, of the experience, because it wasn't necessarily a home run show as to be at live in terms of match quality or even storylines. But what was really cool and interesting was him being able to be involved and see this wrestling community and what AEW is like and what they bring to the table. So that was really interesting to get his perspective on everything as someone who was a fan of wrestling a long time ago, but really hasn't been, and really wasn't too into it then even, but doesn't know a whole lot about now.
That's cool. That's very cool.
Yeah, so it was an interesting experience. It was super fun. It was a decently long drive. We'll go ahead and where do you want to start? Should we start with my experience, or do you want to start with Dynamite in general? We could start with.
No, I want to hear what you thought about it.
Overall, I thought that the live show was really great. The crowd in Denver was spectacular. I think that's a crowd that will. And here's the thing: it felt like a crowd that was fighting for another show and next time, and that was a good thing. And what was really beneficial for me as a fan who did make that trip, I was a little nervous, like. Will this show deliver, but will the crowd deliver for the company? And at one point beforehand, it was one of the lowest selling shows, but going into the show, I think it had a lot to do with the hype for Matt Hardy, who obviously didn't debut on last night's show, but the tickets that they had on sale were nearly sold out on Ticketmaster. There was 2 tickets available on StubHub when I looked right before the show. So the demand was there. People were interested, and they wanted to sit in decent seats too. So it was really cool to see. Like it was pretty packed for what was on sale. Now, obviously, they had the other half of the arena with no one sitting there, but that seems to be by design at this point.
Yeah, they did the same thing for me. A whole section just empty.
Well, and the thing that makes me wonder is why don't you just run more amphitheaters and stuff like that?
I know, right?
Because this is essentially just that, but you can't film to the wall because the wall is a wall of empty seats. And I totally get it too. From a visual aspect, you want to put this section on sale first, and if everything sells out really quick, maybe you put what's left available on the other side on sale. But it really turned, and the venue was smaller, so no seat would have been a bad seat. Literally, at the highest seat, you would have been fine to see everything. So I was in good seats. I honestly paid $50 for 2 seats. It was a donation to a foundation that AEW was partnering up with, and they gave me 2 awesome seats for literally a $50 donation. It was such a sweet deal. It was a great thing by AEW to do stuff like that as well. Real beneficial way to utilize those seats. So that was cool. And yeah, so it was a really interesting show. There was stuff I felt like was missing. I wished that we had seen more of the Elite as a whole in terms of any of them actually wrestling. But we'll get to that as we do the whole show rundown itself. The merch line was only one line, but it was such a small venue, it didn't seem like much of an issue. The Orange Cassidy shirt did sell out relatively quick. There were a couple other shirts that sold out. I wasn't paying too much attention to the merch because I wasn't trying to wait in that line. That wasn't something I was very interested in. I was just trying to sit and enjoy the show from what was there. And honestly, there were no matches that weren't super, that weren't okay. There were a couple of them that definitely didn't have my attention, but even the one from Dark that didn't have my attention initially, featuring Hikaru Shida, that match was a really good match and worth checking out. We'll talk about that again as we get to the end of the show, but we can go ahead and just jump through Dynamite. AJ, go ahead and you go ahead and start it off.
We kicked it off with Jon Moxley coming out. The crowd was super hot for this, just really loud. Mox said he got the belt. It's not his. It belongs to professional wrestling. It belongs to the fans. It didn't belong to Jericho, and it doesn't belong to him. Mox says that no man in the industry can take the title from him. He knows he's not done with the inner circle, and if they want to try to come and get him, he dares them. Then from there, Jericho comes out and the inner circle with him. Jericho says he doesn't need the belt to be Le Champion and calls Mox a rebel with more guts than brains. And Moxley era has begun, but Jericho says it sucks ass. And that Mox's win was based on a lie after he was revealed to not be half blind. And after tonight's main event, Mox will not walk out of the ring on his own 2 feet. And if that doesn't come to fruition, Jericho will leave for not 30 days, but 60 days. Mox says no one called him a genius, but after tonight, he will beat Jericho and send him packing and make him look like a stupid son of a bitch.
Yeah, this was a good promo, really great promo from a live perspective. The crowd was super into everything Jericho had to say, especially. He had so many different chants get started, directed both at him and along towards Mox at some points. So that was really great. I had liked the build of this 60 days thing, but I honestly forgotten about it by the main event and then the angle they ran with it in the main event. Like, it makes sense, but I had totally forgotten that part.
Yeah, I was really thinking, like, oh my god, is Jericho going to leave early? Is he, like, because he's going to do his tour,
and it makes sense to lead up to his tour. Yep, exactly.
But so I was like kind of worried because I know that Jericho's not champion anymore, but I wasn't expecting that, especially 60 days without him. I don't know how we would do there. But obviously that didn't happen, but we'll get to that later.
And the big thing about that is he was very specific in just saying he would leave on his own 2 feet. So I thought maybe they were even setting up an Archer debut where Archer takes him out.
That's what I thought. I was right there with you.
He has to be carried out,
both hoping for that.
And then you set up Archer versus him down the line 60 days from now after his tour and everything. And again, I think that they were in a position where they could do something like that. But on shows like this where you want to give the entire elite the night off, I guess you need Jericho.
Yeah, you kind of do, especially on shows like this. I don't know what they would have really done here without Jericho. It would have been a very lackluster show. Not that the show is amazing, but it would have been a lot worse is what I'm trying to get at. It was a fine promo. I think Jericho got a lot of really good heat here. Like, he was even making fun of the fans for not chanting in unison. He was really going after everything. And the crowd was super on fire for this. My biggest gripe with it is that it felt a little WWE to start the show off with about a 15-minute promo. But, they've done it a couple times before, so it's not the worst thing.
Yeah, it did feel like a very long promo. That was something I could definitely feel in the arena. And then it was interesting because we almost quickly transitioned to the next segment being the tag team match between SCU and Colt Cabana and taking on the Dark Order. And this felt so quick to me, but it also made me realize, like, damn, this is how it feels to be in the arena, because we watch live at home every week and we're like, AEW, they don't go to commercial, they just keep things moving, and you don't realize the pacing of that in the venue. But it's not bad pacing either. It's just very cool to see, like, oh, we just got that promo, boom, right into the next match. There's not a whole lot of dilly-dallying.
Yeah, they move quick. And on note of that, that's what we got next. We got SCU and Colt Cabana beating the Dark Order in about a 10-minute match. Yeah, 10 minutes. And this was fine, but goddamn, the wrong team won.
Yeah, the wrong team won, and it just felt really flat in terms of a lot of people were anticipating this to be Matt's debut, and you understand why it's not Matt's debut, but gee, like,
yeah,
it was the way you booked it and the way you've been talking about it is almost as if it was this, like, saying he's near and it still being 4 weeks since that has started. It's just kind of getting to be like, oh man. And so, and then them losing and the way that they just brushed it off as, oh, he's not going to be happy about this. This isn't how it was supposed to go.
Yeah.
It was just kind of like, okay.
Yeah, exactly. That I couldn't sum it up better than that. It just felt like, okay, fine, but what are we doing? And I
Especially
guess
with
they
Colt in this
revealed,
match, it felt like, okay, he's in there to take the fall. He's someone who
yeah.
can afford to lose in this one, and apparently not. So
No, I guess they wanted Cole. I guess that might be why they won. Maybe they wanted Cole Cabana to win on his debut, but it felt awkward to me. Just why would you have the Dark Order? Whatever, they have all this steam built up, and there's so much hype built around them at this present moment in time because of Matt Hardy. Even if it's not Matt Hardy, which I think it is, then why would you have them lose?
yeah, for sure, I have to agree 100%. And I think if it wasn't going to be Matt Hardy, they would have done whoever it was this week. You know what I'm trying to say?
Yeah,
Like,
I totally get
with it
that.
being Matt, I get wanting to save it because A, his contract just came up, so you want to be careful, and
Hmm.
B, like, you want to do it in a bigger venue so the pop is a little bit more like it would have been a big pop and it probably would have been just as loud, but you can't hit the crowd shots that you can in a full arena. So
Yeah.
that makes sense to me. I totally get it. It's not the end of the world, but it just felt like a really flat, weird segment when it felt like in some way I was like, damn, this is gonna be we might really start the show off with Matt's debut and something really crazy. And I wasn't bummed out or mad about it. It was just more or less like, okay.
Yeah, and it kind of was like the second flat Dark Order segment in the week because I
But
mean,
I have to say, sorry to interrupt you. It
no,
was
you're
a
fine.
flat Dark Order segment for sure, but I have to say SCU and the way that they performed really stood out to my mom's boyfriend Aaron. He was super impressed with them, and it was interesting to me because I've seen SCU so much. I've seen a
Yeah.
lot of their stuff, and it also goes to say that they did a good job of booking on the card where there in the dark match you might have expected a couple of dives because it featured the Jurassic Express taking on Kip Sabian and Peter Avalon, so you might expect the
Mhm.
Jurassic Express to do a couple dives. They kept it very much in the ring, so that by the time SCU came out, he was very impressed with their moonsaults, their flips, their dives, all of this stuff, which I thought was really cool because SCU doesn't necessarily resonate with me, but they resonate with a lot of other fans, and this makes
Yeah.
sense. Like as a casual fan, I think if we were to ever go to an AEW show again, he would immediately be cheering for them. So
That's cool. And yeah, I mean, I still like SCU. I think they're a great team. And like you said, for me, it wasn't the most exciting thing, but to get that other perspective is really important. That other people are resonating with the SCU.
for sure. And then after this, we get what? Britt Baker joined commentary. I honestly had no idea that this happened. If it wasn't for your notes, I would be
Yep.
totally unclear of this. So I'm sure maybe there was a popper or something for this in terms of people who were paying attention. I might have just been talking or not paying total attention or whatever.
I'm
So
surprised they didn't give her an entrance or anything, but no, it didn't look like they gave her an entrance on the show either. So
yeah,
that would make sense that you
she
didn't
probably
know.
snuck out during the highlights of that tag team match and just joined commentary. So.
Yeah, and she came out, coffee for Tony, blah blah blah. This was weird to me because she was obviously there for the Big Swole Leave a Beach match, but that match was so quick. Why even have her on? She might have said like four in sentences, maybe not even, of something that was relevant, and then she was gone, and that's it. And it's like, why even bring her out here? I get it, you want to build up the women's division, but I don't think this really did anything for anybody.
I like it if it leads to somehow Swole beating Baker, just because I like what Swole's got going on for her. And Swole,
Swole's cool.
she's got a personality about her that there was this girl sitting behind me who very much wasn't a wrestling fan, and you could hear her be like, "Oh, she's cool. Like this is cool. This is different. I like the character or whatever that's going on with this. Like I like this. She's a badass woman." And like that was cool, and so it was cool to see her get the victory there. And I would again like to see it hopefully lead to her versus Baker down the line. And maybe Britt's like, hey, I was there on commentary for that match, and I will not fight her because I saw what she did, or come up with some lame excuse not to. But we know the real reason, so maybe.
Yeah, I mean, she didn't say anything alluding to that. Just, oh, big swole, incredible athlete, but I don't like her, blah blah blah. The usual kind of peel gimmick. But I wouldn't mind Britt Baker and Big Swole as long as Big Swole's the one going over. But I have a feeling it would be Britt.
Yeah, that would make some sense too. They do stuff like that in some case, but I could see them like I think there could be money in a Swole versus Nyla match if you build Swole up as this person
Totally.
who just runs through Leva and people like Leva. So her doing that to Leva, I was like, cool, this is good. and just
Yeah,
keep
I didn't
doing that.
mind the squash. I mean, I was happy they gave the women a segment. I was happy Big Swole got on TV. I was just confused about the Britt Baker stuff personally.
Yeah. So nonetheless, a good match, a good enough short match, and sometimes you need to do stuff like that. I've almost been thinking about that more recently. That not all the time, but more often, I would like to see quicker finishes in AEW in terms of like
Yeah.
big people dominating and having a big successful win to make them seem more dominant. Because even someone like Jake Hager, Luchasaurus, Wardlow, these guys are huge guys, but they don't really have those dominating, impressive wins. It was something I was really hoping for a match on Dark, just be a quick 2-minute boom.
Hmm.
Like because Archer hadn't debuted and I hadn't heard anything about it, I was thinking that could even happen on Dark as much
I
as
was too.
it would have been a mistake, but I was anticipating it to an extent. So when they said this is the last match, I was really excited because I knew I could leave. I knew because
Yeah.
if they didn't say that, I would have been waiting to be like, man, maybe Archer will be in the main. So
No, I hear you. I would have been waiting for Archie just the same.
So yeah, that was great. That was a good segment live. What was a great segment live is Cody coming out to complain about MJF and that whole situation and gets interrupted by Jake the Snake. How did this come off on TV?
I personally I liked it and I thought it came off well. I thought Jake Roberts just has an aura about him of being I don't know what to say. He just has like the like when there's like an old timer guy and when he walks in the room he just kind of demands respect. That's how I feel about Jake Roberts. Every time I seen him, just like he has this mystical thing about him. So I loved it. I'm super over on Jake Roberts. The only thing I've heard negative about this is, any company that's ever worked with Jake Roberts has regretted it. So that's considering obviously his past demons. But as far as I know, in the past few years, everything's been fine with Jake Roberts. So who knows? This could be a great redemption story for him.
Yeah, and if anything, like to go along with what you said initially and the fact that he's a legend who commands respect, if he was still that person who did sort of burn every company that he had worked with, I don't necessarily think he would command that respect. But the reason he does is because you have seen the change over the last five,
Yeah.
10 years where he has become this new person and you can now respect that legacy in terms of before you had to feel bad and almost disappointed in what was wasted in that legacy.
Hmm.
Instead, now as fans, we look at this guy and we're like, wow, he's come so far. And then you can just allow him to go back into being this grimy badass. And it almost is so much more believable because of the shit that he lived. But it's
Yeah.
nice that it's not too believable in the fact that he's living such a horrible life. So it's like he's like so borderline of a grimy scumbag himself, but like not like and in the most like nice way in terms of wrestling because he comes
No,
in
I
and he's
hear
just
you.
like you're like, oh man, he's different and you got to give him respect. And the thing about him is another time in this show where Aaron was like, holy shit, because he knew who Jake Roberts was.
Yeah, I
And when
bet.
he seen him, he was like, no way, like this was really cool for him. And so it made me realize like there's a lot of moments every week where we're watching AEW and there's a Arn Anderson or a DDP or Jake the Snake Roberts, and we're like, why are you giving these guys time? And maybe not in the case of Jake, but in the case of some of these other guys. And if you
Hmm.
think about it, they do a lot on every show to cater to every type of fan who goes to an AEW show, which is really smart because for probably 90% of the arena, it's their first show for AEW in terms of being at one live, especially once you start getting to the West Coast. You're not going to have a whole ton of traveling fans come out to the Colorado show. So for a
Yeah.
lot of these guys, it's their first show, which means they're bringing along a brother, a cousin, a friend, people who don't watch AEW because you don't want to go alone. But there's no way all of these people watch it, and that was very evident by who I was sitting around. It was always one person with another two or three, like, yeah, he watches AEW, but I'm just now getting into it, or I'm just. And the positive thing is again, these shows are good. They're entertaining for the new
Yeah.
fans too. And having a Jake the Snake Roberts and having like it's a little bit of fan service to every demographic, I would say, and it's so smart and done in a great way that even a show that by the standard that AEW puts out, it wasn't the best, and by what people may have expected with the tease of surprises and debuts and this and that, it wasn't the best, but still everyone went out of there like still happy with the money they had spent and enjoyed the product that they had received.
Yeah, and I totally get that. I mean, when I went with two people. I went with four total, including me, and two of those people were not particularly huge wrestling fans or super familiar with AEW. Like they were semi-familiar, but it was the show itself that really got them over on it.
Yeah, so it was just, so it's just a testament, like the things with Jake the Snake Roberts and all of these other legends that they bring in. We might not love it, and the listeners might not love it, but it's still there for a reason, and it works, and it's smart, and you can't love every minute of AEW, but they do a pretty good job with what they've got. So
Yeah,
I really
and
liked
in the
this with Jake,
case,
and it was a good build to whoever his person's going to be. I want it to be Brody so bad.
okay, here's my thinking. I'm thinking it's going to be Lance Archer for two reasons. One, they didn't have Lance Archer show up on the show, and so I'm thinking, okay, creative changes. Then let's go with you're going to do something with Jake. Number two, you need to have a guy who's really big to be for Jake to manage them because Jake is kind of a huge ass dude, and he's going to make Brody Lee look smaller.
You really think so? I don't think that Brody's that
Yeah.
small in terms of.
I don't think he's that small. I think Brody would look a lot bigger compared to most of the guys already on the roster if there wasn't a huge guy next to him.
I don't know. I don't think that he's got that much on Archer. I mean, there is a significant height difference for sure. But I think that in terms of the storyline and Archer not showing up, it definitely does lean into the fact that it could be him as well. I wouldn't be mad if it's some super group of just hoss-ass, grimy dudes.
That would be sick, yeah.
So whatever it is, if it's Brody or Lance, they've done a great job at positioning them. The reason I feel like it could be Brody is just because it's a good way to play this up leading up to the Rochester show and not just have him show up out of nowhere. This is a good way to lean into it. But if it's for Archer, good on them for realizing that he's someone who can benefit from a lead up as well. He doesn't need it, but it's good to have for him to not just be like, oh, I'm debuting. Like, there's actually something behind it now, which would be cool. So either way, I'm good with it. Jake has done a great job. Whoever he's paired up with is immediately going to be an impact player. And by putting him with Cody, that just makes it that much more evident. The one thing that's concerning is Cody's kind of on a losing streak in terms of big matches.
That's true.
So whoever he's paired up against needs to be able to probably eat a loss early.
Yeah, that's going to be tough. I mean, you obviously don't want Brody Lee losing in Rochester on his debut if that's when he's going to debut. Lance could probably recover from it easier.
But that would be the second time of a debut against Cody, and they would.
It would.
So
Yeah.
I mean, I think Cody would probably put him over, and that's not to say it's a bad thing. I just think that with it being Cody, it's very interesting, and he has suffered a couple of losses. He can suffer one more, but he'll get it back. Whoever this is, they're not just going to walk away going totally over.
Yeah. Or, you could have them face off with Cody and then MJF screws Cody over, and then that's how you lead into another MJF match. There's a few things you could do. I think it'll be fine. I think they have an idea of what they're doing here.
Oh, for sure. And if nothing else, it was a very good beginning to a storyline. It's very much the start. Jake's promo is very much like the beginning of lines that will start being pieced together to make that video down the line that we talk about every time that they put together, video packages. So
said never turn your back on someone you respect or are afraid of, and so he does that, throws the mic and leaves.
Yes, so absolutely a great way to begin this storyline. And then from there, we sort of begin another storyline after the Pac and Chuck Taylor match. So let's go ahead and talk about that match real quick.
Yeah, that was it was fine. It's Chuck Taylor and Pac. It was about as good as I expected it to be. Not knocking Chuck Taylor. Chuck Taylor did a fine job, but it's not Pac versus Trent, and that's obviously what they're building towards. But it seems like what they're building towards. So they're obviously doing a three-way, but it seems like Trent and Pac are the guys who are, they're staring down post-match.
I don't know. During the middle of the match, we had the Pac and Orange Cassidy stare down. We do have Trent come over and sort of get involved in that, but it almost seems like what would make sense to me is we're building to Orange Cassidy facing Pac once again down the line, and then you have the
You
Best
think?
Friends take on the Lucha Brothers just because of how
Yeah, I
this
guess
with
that's
the
true.
6-man setup of it all. But yeah, the match itself was good. I was confused because I was expecting, okay, um, Orange has a great match against him, has plenty of time. Chuck gets beat in like 2 minutes, like just
Yeah.
to emphasize Orange's will and test like his fortitude and everything. But then as the match goes on and Chuck gets a little bit more in, I'm like, what is going on? I don't totally understand. After the match, I get it now. We're leading to a 6-man feud, and you have to make Chuck and Trent look legitimate in this as well.
Yeah, it was. You're right. You're dead on with that. But it was a little confusing there for a little bit. I get it though, and I'm not opposed to it, and I think it's going to be okay. I think it's an okay feud. I don't think it's not what I was expecting post pay-per-view. I wasn't expecting a new stable, and let alone the new stable that's going to feud with the Best Friends. But hell, why the fuck not?
And it's a mean stable of talented guys. Like
It really
these
is.
these three are arguably the elite, like light or the underground elite, you could call it almost. Where
Yeah,
it's not the consensus mainstream pick for you to say Pac is the best wrestler in the world, or the consensus
but
mainstream
the
pick
work
to say
rate.
the Lucha Brothers are the best tag team in the world. But yes, as you said, the work rate, the talent, the matches these guys put on, their ability to put other people over, their ability to leave and come back and still be fantastic, and
Hmm.
almost the ability to pair these three who they don't necessarily mesh together for the obvious reasons, but if you look at it, you're like, okay, this can be good, and this can be
Yeah,
really cool and interesting. And they don't have the best name, I guess, in Death Triangle, but I think it's more so they want to lean into the Spanish version of it, with the Lucha Brothers, which sounds a little bit more badass. So.
and it also, I think this will benefit the Lucha Brothers because you have an English speaker who can, one, promo very well, and two, make them look better or in promo segments and
He
interviews.
can feed them perfectly in the sense of say everything that needs to be said in the beginning, and you guys say your catchphrases at the
Yeah,
end. You say the name of the group at the end, and we just look badass. And this, I hope they stick together for a while. Like this wasn't a pairing I was looking for, and I was almost confused about why they kept getting involved. But as it became more apparent, and this is what it was, I was like, oh, this is pretty sweet. Like I'm down with this. So
yeah, totally agree there. I never expected anything like this, but the fact we got it, I'm down with this. And even if it's just them having good ass matches, I'm fine with that.
yeah, so definitely an interesting, good setup to a storyline. Um, we got some more build to a storyline in this next match, but this next match was confusing as all hell to me. Like honestly, it wasn't even confusing. I just didn't give it a whole lot of attention.
Yeah, I hear you. It was Jake Hager beating QT Marshall, which was okay
Wasn't this
match.
wasn't this T oh this was talked about as a singles match, huh? I thought it was going to be a tag team match for a while. But
Yeah, it was a singles, but it wasn't a singles match. I don't think anybody was really looking forward to. And it's kind of awkward to me that we're going from okay, Jake Hager barely wrestles, and when he wrestles, it's going to be special. To okay, have him wrestle Dustin and then put him against QT Marshall. Okay, that's fine. It's just a little different.
how did his
Um,
finish come off on TV this week? Because I noticed it was the
it looked
same thing
fine.
and it was just kind of boring. Like it's such a slow
It is a
and
weak finish, yeah.
it's like it's such a weak way to end a match. It doesn't feel like the person is even being hurt that much. And when you know that it's a scripted show, you assume the person isn't being hurt that much if it doesn't look like it because they just go from hanging out for a second to immediately pretending to be passed out. They don't think about the actual sell of being choked out and how you would
Yeah.
react. Yet for some reason it takes 45 minutes to tap out of a Walls of Jericho. So it's just it's stuff like that I wish was a little bit better, and I wish someone would go to them and be like, "Hey, before the match, like, hey, when he locks that into you, you have to sell that as you're being choked out. Don't just choke out."
Yeah, I don't like the finish. He could when you have a guy like Jake Hager who can throw around half the roster, why are you giving him a submission finisher to begin with?
Because he's an MMA, and that's what you do.
Yeah, I guess so. Well, you want to get into the post match stuff?
Oh, for sure. The post match was freaking sweet from a live perspective. I loved this. So
It was cool. It made up for the bad match, that's for sure. Well, I don't want to say bad match, but boring match. Let's put it that way. Jake doesn't break his hold on QT. Dustin runs in for the save, gets jumped by Proud and Powerful. Then, while he's getting jumped, Cody Rhodes comes out for the save, but then he gets hit with a chair. Then Matt Jackson runs out. No Nick Jackson, because Nick Jackson is at home with his pregnant wife. Matt Jackson runs out but loses with Hager. Then Hangman finally comes out, and this was sweet as all hell. Comes out, just walks down, no urgency whatsoever, has a beer in his hand, sets it down on the ring post, and then just cleans house, flips off Matt Jackson, and leaves.
Yeah, this was so fun to watch live. The one thing that sucks is when you guys advertise that someone is going to debut, in every segment like this, you have the fans kind of thinking, "Oh, is this where Archer is going to? Does he have his sights set on Jake Hager? Perhaps that's what he was alluding to, because he had made some tweets on social media and stuff in that regard. So it's stuff like that like the end result of it all was probably better than if it had been Archer's debut. But it felt like it was leading to that until even after Matt had come in and gotten attacked, I was like, whoa, is that what's going to happen? And, of course, Hangman comes out, and this was fun. This was really cool because obviously no Kenny there. Hangman just helping to apparently because of Cody, you would assume, or Dustin, which is really cool. And then Matt Jackson kind of going out, reaching for a handshake or whatever, and Hangman just flipping him off. Like, what a great, just more way to build Hangman in such a great way. Like, this has been so great. And seeing that live was just really fun. And he gets to drop Hager with a sweet buckshot. Like, he looked like $1 million leaving that, and then stole $1 million worth of beer on his way out from all the fans. So,
do you think this is the build to War Games? Because you got, what, 4 and 4?
Yeah, probably. That would make some sense in that you would probably get something like that. Still weird, though, and we have to wait and see because they're talking about announcing rules, so I think they could still try and change things up and make it something else. Like, we'll have to wait and see. I think it's very, very optimistic for us as fans to just assume it's going to be a straightforward War Games match. I think it very much could be something of 8-man, you're not necessarily a tag team match, but like solo, because all they've said is 2 rings, 1 cage. They haven't said how many men. They haven't said team versus team. They haven't. It's just blood and guts too. It very much could be just setting up like an elimination chamber style match, but instead it's in 2 cages or 2 rings with a big cage. I'm not saying that's what I want or don't want. It's just with them not being totally clear on it yet. It's who knows? Who knows if it's even going to be team versus team?
Yeah, it's possible that they do something different here, which wouldn't be the worst thing in the world. I don't know how I would feel about it if it was solo, because that seems so chaotic, and it obviously can't be one fall to a finish, or if that's the case. Or, I mean, you can't, I mean, you would be eliminating guys for sure, and then it would just come down to one guy, which I guess works. I don't see why it wouldn't.
And here's the thing, too, is I think even maybe us as fans aren't super certain, like, because I know for sure I don't necessarily know the whole setup of a War Games match in terms of what the exact rules are, because I've seen War Games matches a long time ago, and then I've seen other, like, reincarnation idea, like you've seen the War Games match, which is, or not War Games, I don't even know, the TNA King of the Mountain match, which obviously isn't that, but just a play on something like that where you have someone caged and then entering the ring. It's like so much of it plays together in your mind as a fan that the traditional War Games match, like, I'm not super clear on what it is. You might be, but I'm sure there's a lot of people who aren't either. So they will have to explain it in some way, and that means they can change it if they want to.
I mean, you kind of nailed it. It's like a 4 versus 4 King of the Mountain match, basically. People come in at different intervals, and you have, I think, eliminations, and
that's the thing is we think eliminations.
Yeah,
but
well, I should know this because I just watched one.
Yeah, man, and that's the thing is they're a little bit hectic in general. So that's going to be tough to put on television too, with commercial breaks and stuff in the middle. It'll work. It'll be all right. But I like it. I'm curiously waiting and cautiously optimistic, I guess is the right word for it. And that makes me really excited for it. But I would love to see some type of, like, make it for something. Don't make it because of a feud, because there's no, in my opinion, there's no feud right now that deserves that kind of match. So make it somehow for something.
Yeah, I mean the biggest thing, because like you would think, oh, the Inner Circle and the Elite, that makes perfect sense, but right now it really doesn't. What makes perfect sense is John Moxley versus the Inner Circle. So you don't have guys with John Moxley. I mean, I guess you could make a team, but that might be a little, I don't
It
know,
would
too
need to
quick.
start next week, essentially, or
Yeah,
because they just put him through the table to close out the show. So you could very well begin it next week with him, Darby, and Dustin and QT Marshall. I mean, dude. So I
yeah,
mean,
I don't know.
we'll still have to wait and see. We say that a lot with AEW, but
Yeah, it
it
usually works
usually
out.
pays off. Yeah. So there's that. 100%. And so I'm just curious to see where all that goes. But a very good end of segment there. And then after that, they highlighted what they've got announced for next week.
Yep. Next week up is Ortiz versus Cody. Building off of that, the Death Triangle will make their in-ring debut next week. No opponents announced yet. Blood and Guts rules will be announced next week, like you mentioned, and the Jurassic Express will take on the Butcher, the Blade, and MJF.
Yeah, so that's a decent match, but very much another match you see lined up to put MJF over, and the Jurassic Express kind of gets pushed down the line. I could see them getting some type of upset victory here, but I don't think you beat MJF so quickly after beating Cody. That doesn't seem like something Cody would do or anyone in that booking committee would do. I think they're all smarter than that. Even if he's not the one taking the pin, the fact that you count wins and losses so much, I
Yeah.
don't even think he's lost yet. So you
Well,
don't
he
have his
lost really early on, but not in 2020.
yeah, so you don't tack on a loss off of a 6-man, I don't think. Ortiz versus Cody, that should be fun. I'm glad that those guys are getting an opportunity to shine as single stars without having to be separated as a tag team.
Yeah, it's going to be. I really do like that. I like seeing Ortiz and Santana wrestle in singles matches. I liked how good they are in singles matches. They're not just a tag team. And I'm excited, really excited, more so than I was with John Moxley to see him wrestle Cody.
Yeah, so that should be good and should be fun and exciting for him. And it's almost like that match with Moxley sets you up to be more excited for the next one just because of how he
Yeah.
performed in that one. Because, yeah, I don't think necessarily I would be super excited for an Ortiz versus Cody match early on in AEW, but now that they've done more to establish his credibility as a single star, I'm definitely more intrigued for it. But the thing that does kind of suck is it will probably lead to a loss for him, which these aren't bad losses because they're coming to top guys, but
Yeah.
it's a different style of booking.
It definitely is. And it kind of sucks. You don't
It
want to see
doesn't
Ortiz lose that much.
Yeah, it doesn't hurt them too bad because you can always tell the story of they're much better off as a team than they
Of
are as
course.
solo units. So it's not the end of the world, but they are a team who was a little bit higher ranked and might start falling down their ranks just because of their win-loss now going quite a bit lower.
Yep. But I like you said though, you can always use that tag team excuse, and you can always have them just rack up some wins as a tag team, which I really hope happens sometime soon. Even if it's on Dark, I just want to see them kind of wrecking AEW.
Yeah, for sure. I'll have a lot more to say about Dark towards the end of the show, but from here we get MJF cutting a promo on Moxley, and I just have to say I was right. I knew that MJF was going to win at the pay-per-view and go on to challenge Moxley for the championship. So
Yep.
ta-da! But I don't know. It doesn't. It looks like it could be something that comes further down the line, though, because he very much addresses his match with the Jurassic Express next week, and it seems
The
like that could
T-shirt.
go. That it seems like that could go somewhere. And then yes, the T-shirt. The T-shirt was great because isn't this a playoff of something with Dusty in the past?
I'm not sure, but I know he just said that line. It's quite distracting, almost like a neck tattoo, and I popped really hard.
Yes, but I want to say there was like a I pinned Dusty shirt back in the day or something of that nature, or or it might not have been Dusty. It's definitely an old school thing, and if you're a fan who knows this, you're like yelling at me because I'm an idiot. But nonetheless, it's a play on something that obviously Cody would take to heart a little bit, and then obviously shits on him for the neck tattoo. So that was great, and a solid promo by MJF to very much attack about 7 people in the course of 2 minutes.
Yeah, he did a great job as he always does. This was a solid promo. Got the right kind of heat. I'm glad he made fun of the tattoo. I wasn't even considering it before. I was just thinking like, oh, they're not going to mention the tattoo, and I didn't even think about the tattoo. Then he mentioned it, and I was like, oh, god damn, that makes so much sense for MJF to just be a prick about it.
Yep.
And really solid, like you said. He just ran down everybody in the span of 2 minutes.
Yeah, so MJF really stood out, and he's someone that they've done such a great job at just
Yeah.
utilizing him sparingly. He doesn't have to wrestle every week. Even like, look at this card, man. There was essentially a whole lot of the top half of the roster not featured on this card for one
Mm-hmm.
reason or another, and it wasn't the end of the world, and that's a good thing.
Yep. Also, we're going to go over this after we cover Dark, but the ratings have come in, so I just wanted to make mention of that.
Dun-dun-dun,
Uh,
dun-dun-dun.
but you stay tuned and you get to hear them. Then we got the main event. We got Proud and Powerful attacking Jon Moxley during his entrance for the matches, obviously Darby Allin and Jon Moxley versus Chris Jericho and Sammy Guevara. And while Jon Moxley was walking down to the entrance, Jake Hager and Proud and Powerful come at him. They beat him down. He's selling a trash can. He gets trash thrown on him. Jake Hager locks in a submission move, makes him pass out because he keeps getting up to fight. And well, and then Darby Allin elects to wrestle alone against Chris Jericho and Sammy Guevara, and he lasts 14 minutes in there. And he makes Darby Allin look like a goddamn star. That's what this did. This was like what happened with Jungle Boy, where they tried to make him look really good by fighting Jericho in 10 minutes, except it was just felt way more natural because Darby Allin is just going at it all alone.
Giving him all he's got and getting the crowd behind him the whole
Yeah,
time, which was great.
super
Like,
good.
Mox was making his entrance right up by where I was seated, and that I was like, "This is cool as hell." And then he stops like right at my row, standing there, and all of a sudden you see two masked guys beating the piss out of him. I'm like, "Yo, what the hell is going on?" So this was cool, and then you see him beat him down into the arena area near concessions and stuff, throwing garbage at him. So that was cool. That was really awesome to see, and a good way to set up Darby having to fight these guys alone. Again,
Super good.
the problem with not having Archer is at a point I was like, oh, is Archer going to debut and be
Yep.
Darby's partner and once again take on Jericho? Again, I was thinking you're setting up Archer versus Jericho to get Mox on MJF, but obviously that's not the case. We get Darby.
And I was even thinking, that, okay, Mox is going to come out after the match and then Lance Archer is going to come out and just destroy him. But that didn't happen either.
Yeah, so you just have so many different scenarios potentially involving Archer that announcing him prior was just a mistake and just something
Absolutely.
that hopefully they learn from and try not to do again, because not just does it suck for the fans in terms of you want to see him, you're constantly throughout the show like, oh, is this going to be it? Is this going to be it? And you just kind of feel like, I don't know, you just feel played around with a little bit. But nonetheless, the match itself was great. Darby looked great. Darby goes for a dive on Jericho outside of the ring, and he hit his back elbow, the Judas effect, knocks Darby clean out. They toss Darby back in the ring, and Sammy gets the pin over
Great
Darby.
finish.
Solid finish. Darby had just got done looking like $1 million, but Jericho's intelligence plays off for him. It was awesome. From a live perspective, it was a little confusing because it looked like Jericho was just moving out of the way. You couldn't necessarily realize that he was doing the Judas effect. I'm sure commentary covered that pretty well, but
on TV, the first angle they did, it was hard to see they did the Judas effect, and then the commentary was even confused, and they showed another angle where it was clearly the Judas effect.
Oh, okay. So see, and that's again, it's a move or something they're setting up that can be hard to catch properly, not only on camera but just in general of hitting it. So they did a good enough job. Darby throws himself to literally die. So it was a great finish, a good match. We have Mox come back out after the match, and he tries to run wild on the inner circle until Jake Hager cuts him off, and they threw him off the stage, Shield style. Pissed a lot of people off.
They did the Shield power bomb off the stage, which I thought it was fine. I thought it was great actually, because it goes to show right now Jon Moxley doesn't have anybody to help him.
And the here's the thing, man. it just because it's AEW doesn't mean everything before never happened. Doesn't mean they need to.
Exactly.
Doesn't mean Jericho and everyone in the inner circle need to be like, we have no idea he was ever in the Shield. Think about it from a realistic standpoint. If you know this guy used to have a group with him that used to back him up the way I've got now, and now you're in this company and they're not here, how's the biggest way to say fuck you besides throwing him through a table and then flipping him off? Like, I don't know if they showed that part to close out the show, but you have all of the inner circle flipping Jericho or
Yeah, no,
Moxley
they
off.
showed it.
Yeah, so it's just like, how much better of a job could you have done with something like that? In all honesty, like it was a good solid way to close out the show. But again, it did leave that feeling of, is Archer going to come and take them all out to be Moxley's buddy or whatever?
Yeah.
So it was fun though, and it was a great match for Darby. That's the biggest thing for Darby.
That's the takeaway here. Darby looked like $1,000,000.
Yeah, so, and he had the crowd behind him, he had everything he needed, and just fell short within the match itself, and can definitely suffer a loss. He's someone who, taking a loss, even with win-loss records, it's not going to be a bad thing. They've been doing just fine by him. So, and if anything, it helps out Sammy. Sammy always gets helped by Jericho, and I love that dynamic.
Yeah, Sammy's been looking great, and Sammy kind of got his win back after Darby beat him, which is cool. So that works. It kind of helped everybody here. I mean, Jericho, it didn't really do much for it because he's already on top. But I mean, he got over on. No, actually, it did because he got over on Moxley. He beat him,
and he didn't have to leave for 60 days. So
he didn't have to leave for 60 days. He beat him after the match. He beat him before the match. He beat him after the match. He put him through a table. Because it's the bad guys that lead the story. That's how it works. And so you're getting the heat back on Jericho.
Yeah, and I like that, and I like the way that they've built all of this up for Jericho and Mox. And again, with Sammy, he's someone else that we can now start adding into that discussion of who are guys that they've elevated to sort of put into a different level than they were when they first started with AEW at the very least. And Sammy's getting to that next level, and it's by a character that doesn't always have to win or be super dominant. It's something else with him, and that's a good thing. And just focusing on him and utilizing him, especially alongside Jericho, has been a solid for him. So they've done great there. And overall, a really, really good episode of Dynamite. Like, I mean, let me not two reallys. It was a good episode of Dynamite.
It was solid. It wasn't my favorite by a long shot, but it wasn't my least favorite either.
It does make me wonder. I feel like I said this before the podcast, but I'm not too sure if AEW, well, I know I didn't say this part. Cody had hyped this show up, or Revolution, to be the WrestleMania of AEW, or potentially the WrestleMania of AEW. Yeah. I really, really have to say, you cannot say this is going to be your WrestleMania show and then deliver this card for Dynamite. That is not to say this was the worst Dynamite ever, but this isn't a post-WrestleMania Raw. There was no super crazy, exciting stuff. And if it's just because it's in Denver, that's totally fine, totally understandable, smaller crowd, you're saving it for the big pop, whatever. You guys control when you book the venues, like you could have done Denver next week and done something better after the pay-per-view if that was your concern. So it really just, it frustrates me as a fan when it's something like, this wasn't a bad show, this was actually a really good show. But you just sent me the ratings, and I see these ratings, and they're good ratings, and that means a lot of people were tuned into not a bad show, but not what you guys are capable of giving them. Now, I will argue that these fans seeing those highlight packages is kind of enough to an extent, especially if they gave the Hangman match enough. So these fans do get to see something really quality there, but it is a little tough. And I totally get we're setting up new storylines, we're doing stuff like that. I just wish that there could have been even a lower card match. I don't necessarily know what it would have been. Bring Janela in for a match that would have been exciting. Bring even Hangman, throw him in a singles match that could have been really exciting. But what we got was, again, not a bad show. I don't want to seem like a super critic, but it wasn't the best show. And with the stuff that we had felt going into it, this is the WrestleMania. There's going to be a lot of surprises. There's going to be all this. There's going to be all that. And for it to just be very much your filler episode or your beginning, your first episode of the season type thing, It's like, man, I don't know.
Yeah, and if you're saying that, then I think that even adds more to it because you were at the show. If you can recognize, well, this wasn't the best show, and it should have been one of the better shows if you're coming off of the pay-per-view, and you know you're going to have a lot of eyes on you, then you really should have delivered more, or you should have debuted Lance Archer, or you should have debuted Brody Lee, or Matt Hardy, or done any of those things that are being hyped and being people are expecting. And I'm sure the ratings, which we're going to get into in a second, have a lot to do with people thinking maybe Matt Hardy's going to be there also. And there's a lot that you could have delivered on that they really didn't deliver on. And again, it wasn't a bad show. They set up angles and pay-per-view stuff, or not pay-per-view stuff, post-pay-per-view stuff where people obviously need to move into new angles or establish what they're doing. And they did a good job of that. But overall, and I get it, you don't want to have Hangman or Kenny wrestle because they just wrestled this hellacious match. And it goes the same with Cody and John Moxley and Jericho, but John Moxley and Jericho wrestled.
Yeah, and so you put over the tag team match really well and stuff and what they went through and whatnot, and I get all of that. It's just I don't know, man. For it to be a big show right after the pay-per-view, and here's again, the way that they had promoted it of being surprises and Archer and this and that and the third, because you close out the show with a good angle. That's a good angle to close out the show. Those guys standing tall over Mox, throwing him through the table, doing the shield powerbomb, flipping him off. Like, instead of the fist gesture, they're flipping him off. So I totally get it. It's a good scene. It's a great way to close out the show. But if any of those fans that were tuned in were wanting Matt Hardy to finish the show or Archer to close out the show, you do leave them being like, eh. But it was a good enough show, I will say, that anyone who was new to it will be entertained and probably tune in again. But there was something else we were expecting from this big paper. Like, I maybe I just have it wrong in my head, and I'm not gonna say that they're wrong. Maybe I'm wrong in terms of I always want some huge show going in and out of a pay-per-view, and and they just keep it very casual.
You're right to want that. I think that's what most people want. You watch a post pay-per-view show expecting that all the fallout is gonna be there, and everything that happened is gonna have some either repercussion or there's gonna be victory or new storylines or new angles and new matches, and you expect a lot from a post pay-per-view show because a lot's supposed to happen.
Yeah. Nonetheless, though, I don't want to keep harping on the things that didn't happen or what I didn't like about Dynamite because it was a good show. It was a good showing, and it's fair enough to say that it was a really good show based on the ratings. Let's just jump into it before we talk about Dark. AEW won every demo except for Over 50, which was a tie. They ranked number 5 in the overall, or in the prime demographic. I believe that's how they rank it. So AEW closed out the night with 906,000 viewers, beating out NXT, who only had 718,000. This very much correlates to the number that they generally do coming off of a pay-per-view, and they're kind of been hovering around 900,000 anyway. So I think there maybe was even a hope to hit 1 million coming into this one, but I don't know. There wasn't. And here's the thing: without Matt, and they should maybe push in a little bit more that it's going to be Matt if it's going to be Matt. So you can break 1 million for his debut because that's something that should probably be that important.
Yeah, but that said, this is a great number, and so hats off. They did very well this week.
I just hope it wasn't a mistake to not do it this week with all those eyes on the product.
It's possible, especially on a post-pay-per-view show where you're going to have the number boost. You would expect that they would do it then, but I guess not. I do agree with you. I think that might have been a mistake, but with only a little time before Rochester, which I think they said the Exalted one specifically is going to be revealed before then. You would expect that they would have done something here, but I guess not.
Yep. So, yeah, nonetheless, a good enough show, a good rating for sure. AEW continues to hold strong, and that's all we need for them to stick around, really. So everything seems great there. Again, not a bad show. I don't want people to get too hung up in the fact that I would like a little bit more from these post pay-per-view shows. But honestly, that just sets it up for next week where I'm going to come on and be like, man, what a great show. I wasn't totally expecting this from this show, and they did so much stuff that I liked, and they finally debuted Matt, and they were so right by waiting, and I know that's what's going to happen. So because it's been so many times where we've been like, turn Hangman, don't turn MJF, and then when they do all these things, it turns out better than what we thought.
That's fair.
So,
that's very fair.
I did get to be there live, so I know the matches from Dark. I'll go ahead and run through them really quick. We had Luchasaurus and Jungle Boy representing the Jurassic Express, taking on Peter Avalon and Kip Sabian. This was a good one. This is one you should tune into just because of Luchasaurus and Jungle Boy for no other reason. They worked well with Pete and Kip. And then the valets for Pete and Kip were also very entertaining with Marco. So there was a lot going on inside and outside of the ring for this one, but nonetheless an entertaining match, especially for Dark. But these are probably the biggest stars on Dark because after that we get Jimmy Havoc taking on Severino Corrente, a representative of Rocky Mountain Pro Wrestling, a company that at one point had Vince Russo working alongside them, so you can tell the quality of product that Severino brings to the table. They didn't have a bad match. Severino was fine, but it wasn't anything special. And of course we get Luther after the match beating up Jimmy Havoc, so nothing too crazy there. We had Hikaru Shida take on another Rocky Mountain Pro local, Abaddon. This one is one to check out if for no other reason than to just see something different and cool. Abaddon is like an evil witch, Bray Wyatt mixed with like an evil witch. It's very much like you'll be like these are a lot of Bray's tendencies and other women like this. I know that Rosemary does some stuff like this too, so it's not to say that she's very new to or very perfect at this, but this was cool for AEW, and Hikaru did a really good job playing off of this character work. So that was fun.
How was she in the ring?
Abaddon?
Yeah.
She works for Rocky Mountain Pro Wrestling. And
no, but how did she do? I mean,
yeah, that's what I'm saying. She works for Rocky Mountain Pro, and she's very average at best. But the character work was good enough, and she had a decent enough following from the area cheering for her, a lot more than Severino did. So she's not bad. It's just like and honestly, it wasn't a bad match, so I can't really shit on it, and I shouldn't honestly. Her work was just average or very fine, especially matched up with Hikaru. Hikaru does a great job with talents like this too. So the night closed out with Private Party taking on Sonny Kiss and Brandon Cutler. And as I already mentioned earlier, when they mentioned this, I just took it as an opportunity to head home. It's not that I really don't mean to be too disrespectful to these guys, but I just and here's the thing, AEW. Here's the thing, AEW had Aaron hooked, man. He didn't necessarily want to go. He was totally cool with going because it was kind of my thing anyway. But he was like, "Are you sure we could stay? Like, are you sure?" Like, and when we were walking out, he was like, "Well, for us new fans, we want to see all the AEW we can." And I was like, "That's cool as fuck, man." Like, so they do a good job, and to me it said, even though I think that the last match of the night and the last Dark match of the night should feature the biggest talents, sort of like WWE does, where you would probably have Seth versus the top guy or whoever. This is okay because it doesn't really matter. The fans who are going to stick around after the show are going to stick around, and they're going to watch whatever matches you give them. And it gives a team like Private Party the opportunity to really shine. And this one was one I wish was on a little earlier because I would have stuck around to watch it. I know that Private Party especially would have impressed him. I know that Sonny Kiss's different angle or different character would have been something very different for him, so that would have been interesting to see his reaction to that as well. But, it was a fine show overall. From top to finish, it wasn't long. By the end of the show, I did feel a little wore out, but that was probably because it was the most engaged and interactive I had been with a crowd in general in a long time. I don't do a whole lot with wrestling shows. I did at the last pay-per-views and stuff, but that's generally the only time I'm really wore out at shows because you're too busy engaging with what's going on.
Yeah.
I was in a solid section. Everyone was totally into what was going on, so it was great. And I just hope that it turns out the AEW comes back around and maybe puts on a little bit better of a show, just in terms of like guys like Kenny. I would have loved to seen him in a match. But with this not being my first ever AEW show, I was not really upset in any way. It's just more of like a critique type of thing. And it was almost more of a learning experience for me of being like, yeah, you don't have to have your top guys on every week, Andrew, duh. So,
well, of course, but again, post pay-per-view, you kind of think you should.
Yeah, and I'm not saying, well, again, and it fits into the story. It fits my idea of wrestling too, where I've very much been the type of guy who was never a critic of Lesnar being champion, for example, because I want the champions or the special people to only wrestle once in a while. So in that case, I'm good with it. The only complaint I think I have of anything is I wish guys like Hangman and Kenny and the Bucks were in at least one match on Dark. Just one. And that should be your main event match of the show, because I know that, like I just got done saying, fans will stick around. But your last match should really feature one of your very popular guys.
They did the same thing with me. I don't remember what it was, but I just remember they had Janela and Phoenix wrestling, but they didn't have it on last. And they had some random tag team match. And I was just like, why?
Yeah, so I just and it really is very specific to the guys in the Elite, because without them performing on this show, you're very much separating the men from the boys in the sense of these guys aren't as important as your other guys. There's no anything from them. And if that's your intention, that's fine, but I feel like that wasn't the intention. Not initially, at least with Dark.
No, I hear you totally.
It's just very much become it's tough to critique it in that way, because that's what it's literally named Dark, so it's meant to be a show of dark matches, but it's very much become that, a show featuring probably quality matches because they are given enough time and stuff, but it's still a dark show. You're not getting the best talent on it, and that sometimes is a bummer.
Yeah, especially when you're there live and you have to sit through a weird tag team match that you don't really care about.
Yeah, so, and honestly, there were, again, these matches, at the end of the day, I think the only one that really wasn't super, interesting to me was the Havoc versus Severino Corrente match, because I'm super unfamiliar with Severino, and if you've listened to this podcast, you know I'm not going to go to bat for Jimmy Havoc over anything. So the most exciting part of that was Luther coming out, and even that I didn't care about.
Dude, I don't think I'm going to bat for Jimmy Havoc anymore. I think they've run that well dry.
He ran his own well dry 5 years ago. He was very much entertaining when he first burst onto the scene and was popping up in Impact and stuff at first, but there's been no he's an athlete who should learn that you need to evolve your character in some way, shape, or form. He's still the same guy I saw 3, 4, 5 years ago. It's not that different. He's still Jimmy Havoc.
Yeah, I didn't keep up with progress that much, only here and there. So maybe that's why I like him. But I definitely hear you.
But we're not gonna have a Jimmy Havoc long form to close out the podcast. So
no.
But yeah, Dark I think just could use something more in terms of attention from the Hangmans, the Codys, the Kennys, something,
anything,
even Pac, or the top half of the card. It would benefit Dark to have something like that. It would even benefit Dark to have a throwaway championship match on the show, because what reason do fans have to tune in? Yes, you are very much creating a platform and an opportunity for these wrestlers to showcase what they are given. What reason are you giving the fans to tune into this platform that these guys are given? It's not PWG level matches. It's not NWA Power level storylines. So you have alternatives available for you already on YouTube that are better than this. And I'm not saying PWG's on YouTube, but I'm saying Power is already on YouTube. Yeah. You could see essentially the same thing, but with better stories an hour beforehand and with different characters. If you're putting, again, just one or two guys on Dark, I think would really help. And so far, it doesn't seem like that's the way they're going. But I will give them credit, though, that they're putting stories on it. Like this Havoc and Luther thing has been going on for a while, but for a lot of people, they don't even know.
Yeah, and for a lot of people who do know, they don't really care.
That's fair. So it's you're right, because it's a storyline. You're like, cool, we got a storyline on Dark, but then you're like, oh, it's this one.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't know. I think that it sounds like a lot of complaining. It's just some stuff we would like to see changed on Dark. Dynamite overall was fine. Dark really wasn't bad. Again, like I said, it was very entertaining what I watched, and for the people around me, they enjoyed it and they were entertained. So nothing to complain about from the live atmosphere at all. It was a fine show. Enjoyed my time. There was some expectations that weren't totally met, but that's storyline stuff. So you can't hold that against the company at all. So
I'm pretty sure Phil hated the show, and I want to know why exactly.
Man, because I feel like we've already been critical enough of this episode that people would be like, man, why are you guys shitting on the episode so bad? And then Phil would be on here and they would be like, wow, they hate AEW. So it's not to say we hate it. We're just trying to be real. And it can be hard to do that sometimes because some fans, even of WWE or wrestling in general, they think that any type of criticism should be met with anger, and it doesn't have to be that way. So
Yeah, that's true.
but overall, I enjoyed my time. I will absolutely be attending more AEW shows in the future, even if it's a Dynamite. But I will not lie. I will be a little bit more hesitant based upon the product that they gave me, that I might not be so adamant on going to a live show. Like, I'm potentially considering going to the pay-per-view in Vegas. And because it's a week that I have off, I was considering doing the whole week-long vacation in Vegas and going to that show on Wednesday. This doesn't really push me to do that based upon how this post pay-per-view show went, you know?
Yeah, I definitely hear you.
If they had started creating a name for themselves in the fact of, whoa, Dynamite after the pay-per-view is good shit, man. You can't miss it. Like, it's too good to be missed. Then maybe they would have a lot easier way to sell. And I know that's me being overly critical and thinking like, haha, I'm not going to stay for your show. But it is a thing. Like, you wish that these Dynamites, especially right after the pay-per-view, brought a little bit more. Especially if you're going to run in the same arena 3 days after a pay-per-view.
But most importantly, and I hate to harp on it, but it's because people are going to tune in. NXT had 2 cage matches, and they lost by 200,000. So even Matt Hardy aside, people were going to tune into the show because it was the post pay-per-view, and there just wasn't enough on there to, I feel like, really deliver on what you should have delivered on.
Absolutely. But it's not all bad, and it was very much an enjoyable show. It's just, as fans, I think we should always have something to say that we would like to be a little bit better, because it's not always perfect unless we're literally coming off of a show like Revolution, where we probably spent a lot more time talking about how much more exciting everything was. So it's not bad, though. It was a fun show, great time. I had a great time. Is there anything you want to add, AJ, before we close everything out?
No, nothing I can think of.
I don't even know why I ask you every week anymore.
I know, right?
I'm sure fans wonder the same thing. But nonetheless, that closes everything out for us this week. Go ahead and plug your social media.
You can follow me on Instagram at AJ and you can follow me on Twitter at BigMatchAJ. Oh, I mixed it up.
Oh, well, play it backwards, fans. Anyways, if you want to catch the podcast on Instagram, we are at All Elite Everything. We are also on Twitter at All Elite Podcast. We're on Facebook at facebook.com/AllElitePod. And you can catch me on Twitter at All Elite Andy. Until next time, we appreciate the support as always, and we'll see you later.